What if Harry Potter wasn't a story of wonder? What if it had been written by someone else? Someone who saw magic not as escape, but as fear. The scar doesn't just hurt, it remembers. The letters still arrive, but so do the nightmares. The castle isn't safe, it's hungry. And the Dark Lord? He isn't a man, he's fear itself. In this world, the boy who lived wishes he hadn't. Magic is real, but it comes at a cost. So settle in, because in this world, Harry Potter was written by Stephen King. And this is not the story you remember. The scar didn't just burn, it whispered secrets no one else could hear. In the cold, dark silence of his cupboard under the stairs, Harry lay awake, frozen beneath a thin, threadbare blanket. His eyes traced the shadows crawling across the ceiling, but it was the voice inside his head that kept him from sleep. Low, familiar, and somehow his own. Each night the dreams grew stronger. He wandered endless corridors, stone hallways lit by floating candles. He heard screams behind doors that wouldn't open. He saw eyes, red and lidless, watching him through keyholes. And when he woke, he felt them, icy fingerprints on his arms, bruises blooming where nothing had touched him, at least not in the waking world. The Dursleys told him he was strange, dangerous. Aunt Petunia looked at his scar like it might leap from his forehead, not with hatred, with fear. She never spoke of his mother. Only once, through a crack in the door, he heard her whisper to Vernon, "You said it was sealed. You said it was over." Uncle Vernon changed the locks on the basement that night. Harry didn't know what was down there, but sometimes when the house was silent, he heard something breathing. At school, odd things happened. Not just accidents, but echoes. A boy who bullied him got trapped in a janitor's closet for 3 hours. No one remembered letting him out. When Harry got angry, lights flickered. Once, during a test, all the pens around him began to leak. Only his remained dry. Was it magic? Maybe. But it felt heavier than that. Older, more like a presence than a power. And the scar, the thing that made him different, it didn't feel like a mark of survival. It felt like a wound that hadn't closed. He started writing things down. Words from the dreams. Symbols he couldn't understand. When he looked at the pages in the morning, they were still there, ink and all, but sometimes the ink moved, shifted, rearranged itself while he blinked. He asked Petunia about them once. She slapped the notebook out of his hand and said, "That part of your family died with her." But her eyes betrayed her. Not anger, not even hate, terror. There was something ancient sleeping in Harry's blood, something that hadn't died with Voldemort. Harry wasn't just a boy with a past, he was a door, and something was trying to walk through him. The first letter came folded in black paper, sealed with wax the colour of dried blood. It wasn't delivered by post. It was slipped through the crack under Harry's bedroom door in the middle of the night. No sound, no footsteps, just a whisper of parchment against wood. Mr. H. R. Potter, the cupboard beneath the stairs. Petunia found it before he did. She burned it in the sink without reading a word out loud. But more came, by the dozens, then by the hundreds. They flooded the fireplace, spilled from the air vents, curled up like spiders beneath his bedsheets. Vernon boarded the windows. Petunia stuffed rags in the door cracks, but nothing stopped them. And still, they didn't run. They couldn't run. Something wanted Harry to come, something very old, very patient. When the visitor finally arrived, he wasn't the gentle giant Harry had imagined in his daydreams. He was tall and thin, pale as bone, wearing a coat that seemed to swirl like smoke. His eyes gleamed like shards of dark glass. "I've come to collect what belongs to the school," he said in a voice that echoed with cold certainty, "and what belongs to him." He never said who he was, but Harry's scar throbbed in sharp reply. The train to school didn't leave from the familiar King's Cross station. It came through a tunnel hidden behind an abandoned platform, where time slowed to a crawl and the sky above had strange colours. The people waiting there didn't speak. Their eyes were empty, yet fixed on Harry with quiet expectation, or perhaps hunger. The school wasn't a castle here. It was a fortress. Black towers clawed at the sky like skeletal fingers, windows like hollow eyes that watched and whispered secrets. The walls themselves seemed alive, murmuring warnings and threats. The staircases didn't just move, they twisted and turned as if trying to lose anyone who dared to walk them. No one smiled. The professor's eyes followed Harry with an unsettling intensity. Some flinched at the sight of his scar, recoiling like it carried a poison. Others leaned in as if trying to catch a whisper only Harry's pain could send. This was no welcoming place. It was a threshold, and Harry was the key. Harry's house wasn't chosen by a hat. There was no cheering crowd, no ceremony. Only a mirror, tall and cracked, waiting at the end of a long, unlit hallway. When Harry looked into it, there was no reflection, only the faint red pulse of his scar burning in the glass like an ember. From the darkness behind him, a voice whispered one word: "Slytherin." Not a question, a sentence. He wasn't sorted, he was summoned. At night the school moved. Doors that led to dormitories led elsewhere. The dungeons pulsed with heat and breath. Students vanished, returned pale and quiet, or didn't return at all. Still, Harry stayed, because the only thing more terrifying than this place was the way it recognized him. He started to understand the dreams. They weren't visions, they were instructions. And Hogwarts, if it could still be called that, wasn't a sanctuary. It was a mechanism, a ritual in stone and shadow. And Harry, he wasn't just a student, he was the trigger, the offering, the door something was waiting to open. During the year, the castle changed. Not just the staircases or the vanishing doors. The magic itself grew strange. Spells misfired. Wands snapped in trembling hands. Magic was no longer safe. It was volatile, shaped by fear. The Patronus charm didn't reveal hope anymore. It revealed what you feared most. When students cast it, they didn't see silver stags or swans. They saw shadows with familiar voices. Some saw their own eyes staring back at them, wide with terror. Ron no longer slept through the night. He spoke in hurried whispers about shadows that rearranged themselves when no one was looking, about eyes behind curtains and footsteps with no source. Hermione stopped reading aloud. She claimed the books spoke back now. Not in English, but in old broken languages that made her nose bleed and her hands tremble. And Harry's reflection began to change. At first it was subtle, a flicker of red in the eyes, a second heartbeat in his ears. Then his voice echoed when he spoke spells. His shadow stretched too far behind him. Once he looked into a mirror and didn't see himself at all, only a pale figure with a cruel smile, wearing his scar. Then came the forest. One night, the school announced a trip to the Forbidden Forest, a lesson in courage, the professors called it. It was meant to be harmless, a tradition. But the forest was darker than anyone remembered. The trees twisted into unnatural shapes. Mist slithered over the ground, thick and choking, swallowing sound and light. As the group ventured deeper, the air grew colder. Whispers echoed between the trees, voices that spoke their names, but in tones no living throat could make. Most students clutched their wands, too frightened to cast, but Harry didn't feel afraid. He felt known. The shadows watched him differently. They leaned in when he passed. Sometimes he thought he saw things in the mist, shapes that mirrored his own posture, his own stride, but not his humanity. And then the girl vanished. One moment she was there at Harry's side. The next, she was gone, as if the fog had taken her in exchange for something else. He remembered the way she'd looked at him just before it happened, like she was about to speak, like she'd recognized something. They searched until dawn, but the forest offered nothing back. No screams, no blood, not even footprints. Only silence, and the sense that something had been fed. When they returned, the castle was colder. The portraits whispered more often now, their painted eyes darting like they knew something they couldn't say. The missing girl was never found, and no professor ever mentioned the forest trip again. But Harry couldn't stop hearing her voice. When the castle creaked and the shadows lengthened, a faint voice was calling his name from the darkness, asking why. Why? And deep down, Harry feared he already knew the answer. They called him you-know-who, but Harry didn't need the name anymore. He felt him, not in stories, but in silence, as a presence, a cold breath on the neck, a voice that whispered when no one else was near. Not words, just a pull, hunger, the weight of being watched, even when alone. They said he had a body once, a man named Tom. But that man was gone. Now he was something else entirely, a presence stitched into shadows, a spell so dark it had no incantation. He lived in the gaps between thoughts, in the spaces between heartbeats. He wasn't trying to return. He never left, because somehow he was already here. Every time Harry closed his eyes, he saw more, hands reaching from mirrors, the walls bleeding Latin, the shadows that hissed when he passed. And the scar, it was no longer a wound, it was a tether, a root, a door he could not close. Once Harry asked Dumbledore, not the gentle figure from old stories, but a man with tired eyes and ink-stained fingers, "What is he?" Dumbledore didn't answer. He only said,
"There are forces that feed on belief, Harry. And this school, this story, has made you very, very interesting to one of them."
Some nights Harry would wake up in places he didn't recognize. Other nights he wouldn't wake at all. The students whispered of a figure in the forbidden forest, tall, robed in ash, eyes like headlights in a storm. Creatures followed him. Or maybe he was made of them. They never saw his face, but Harry knew he was watching, because sometimes it felt like he was watching them through it. Each time the figure drew near, the world seemed to fade. The story itself began to unravel. Books in the library rewrote themselves. Names vanished from rosters. Some paintings wept as people walked past. The magic was changing, and it was feeding something. And so was Harry. He was not just older, not just stronger, but wrong. His eyes linger too long in the dark. He speaks in other voices during sleep. He no longer fears the whispers. He answers them. Ron avoids him now. Hermione watches him like a scholar watches a dangerous text. They've seen what he can do. During dueling practice, Harry didn't just disarm his opponent, he emptied him, a boy left catatonic, eyes wide, murmuring in languages no one teaches. Harry says he didn't mean to, but the magic is speaking through him now. The castle responds to him. Doors open on their own. Paintings look away. Harry is beginning to understand what it means to be marked. He didn't survive the curse. He became its vessel. And his greatest enemy was no longer you-know-who. It was becoming like him. There will be a reckoning. Magic cannot be used without consequence. The heart of the school, the thing below, is waking, feeding on fear, on love, on memory, on Harry. The Dark Lord isn't coming. He's already here, and he's inside. The friends who followed Harry may become his hunters. The teachers may become sacrifices. The final battle won't be spell against spell, but soul against soul. What remains of Harry must fight what he's becoming. In the end, he wasn't chosen to save the world. He was chosen to break it. And to do that, he'd have to destroy the only thing he truly was, magic. But magic never dies. Not really. It just waits. For the next one. The next story, the next fear. So, would you read this version, or would it haunt you too much? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more stories reimagined like this, you know what to do. It would mean the world to me.